a lot of the critique is about us not being radical enough. And I think the most radical thing I can do as a Palestinian is take responsibility over Israeli society.
I hate the word complicit. I think that when people use the word complicit, it feels like they're motivated by guilt. And I really feel like I'm not motivated by guilt at all. I'm motivated by responsibility.
Hey everyone, I'm Sally Abid.
And I'm Jess Bricker.
And this is The Long Answer,
a deep dive into the hardest questions around Israel-Palestine.
So we started a podcast. Very original.
Super original.
And joking aside, we both work and are activists and leaders within Standing Together, نقف معا, عاملين بياخد, the largest Jewish-Palestinian grassroots in Israel.
So I was a Palestinian citizen of Israel. I'm a Jewish citizen of Israel. And while Israel is deeply, unequal and flawed and we don't experience life in the same way with the same privileges, I think that it's this place where we actually meet and live together and work together.
I feel like we really have a very unique and essential understanding of our reality. We really thought that people need to hear us, that people need to hear not just about our politics, not just about, from the media, from our posts of how we interpret current events and what's happening in our little piece of land, but actually, listen to hard conversations and hard questions and us trying to make sense of them.
I think that the two of us feel a bit like there's some maybe not miscommunication, but there's some sort of block in communication, in our ability to communicate the reality of this place with people abroad. And social media is not enough. These algorithms that just make people angry and make people feel despair all the time are kind of driving everyone crazy. And I think that what we wanted and what we hope that this podcast is going to be is just a real vulnerable conversation. And, we're not promising any, really clear answers about what our reality looks like and what we have to do, but we are promising a really, really vulnerable and personal conversation. And so every episode is going to start with a question that either we ask each other or sometimes we ask a guest. And with that question, we're going to be tackling some of the hardest sort of topics and ideas that relate to this place. And I wanted to start by asking you, Sally. You're a Palestinian citizen of Israel, which I'm sure you're going to expand on a bit more of what that means. You deal every day with, political persecution, with silencing on the part of the government and the society at large. And you're also dealing with kind of a broader movement abroad that says that you shouldn't be working with Jewish Israelis and that you should maybe be more radical or take more radical stances, that you should be fighting against the existence of Jewish Israelis in this movement. So why are you doing this? Why are you here? Why are you starting a podcast? Why are you a city council member in Haifa? Why are you starting a podcast with a Jew? Like what? What is that?
There's a lot to unpack there, Jess. I think, there really is a lot to unpack, from identity. Oh, Palestinian citizen of Israel. Why not Palestinian Israeli? Why not Palestinian? Why not
or Arab Israeli?
What does citizen of Israel mean, when you're Palestinian? Why not Arab Israeli? Why not? There's that. So there is the living experience of being a Palestinian in Israel. And obviously there's the ideological belief that I hold, as a feminist, as a socialist, as a Palestinian on this land. And there's a lot to unpack here. So you're going to help me, ask these questions again so I don't get lost. I just actually celebrated motherhood for 1 year yesterday. It was Shams's birthday.
Congratulations.
And the reason I'm saying this is because I do think it's extremely hard to rationalize and to intellectualize the experience of Palestinians in Israel. Obviously, you can have, I can give you numbers, 2 million, Palestinians within Israel, including around 200,000, a little bit more in East Jerusalem who are not citizens, who are residents after East Jerusalem was annexed. But we are, a large, significant portion of Palestinians on this land who have citizenship, who are living under immense privilege comparatively to Palestinians in Gaza or in the West Bank. We can get elected and we can vote, and we are doctors and we are, pharmacists and lawyers and students. But we are also navigating an impossible, reality. And it is almost an impossibility, being Palestinian in Israel. And I will try to intellectualize that in a little bit, but I want to maybe give a little bit more, experiencing motherhood as a Palestinian. Like, I just want to, in the last year has been shattering, has been soul shattering. Obviously, next to like the joy, the immense, amazing joy from the perfection. I think every bath, every, quiet breastfeeding, every time she got sick, and just witnessing my people going through, and Palestinian mothers going through what they're going through in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, has been soul shattering. Also because it's obviously, just the collective grief and trauma. But also because it's isolating. Motherhood is isolating for many other reasons, hormonal and social, but it's just so isolating as a Palestinian to have that pain, to go around the streets, to talk to your Jewish neighbors and like, can't you see? Can't you see? Like, why are you not talking about this? Why are you not talking to this about me? Like, why are you not fighting this? Why are you disagreeing with me? To the ones who have some illusion that they are in partial agreement with me about things. And it has been very difficult to navigate that, to navigate it like as a human being on the very basic human level. And I think that's an experience that a lot of us Palestinians are a lot of us, all of us, when you are witnessing what's happening in Gaza, and then obviously my baby's 1 year old and she's gone through many wars already. I remember when I got her out of the hospital for the first time on the 11th of September, 2024, there was literally bombs falling in Haifa. Like, I saw them, and I was like delivering, and then I was leaving, and there were sirens while I was like going from the hospital to the house. And then, I just remember all of this. And that's not that's not a Palestinian experience in Israel. That's an Israeli experience as well, right? All Israeli mothers went through that. They went through, all mothers who had babies went through, having to breastfeed and run to the shelter, with their babies, and having to wake up their newborns to go to the shelter, and sometimes not even have a shelter. I think I am immensely privileged, and I feel immense responsibility to talk about these things and insist on delving and grappling on the very meaning of our reality and how we change it because of my dual experience. I don't think there are many people that have my experience, that have my ability for that duality of understanding. Palestinians in Israel are the only group of Palestinians who have that ability. It's out of experience, out of, having the language of being part of Israeli society, unequal, Class B citizenship, silenced, persecuted. We are all of these things, but we also are part of Israeli society.
I think that a lot of the things you said, I think a different person in the same situation would have a completely different response. Yeah. And that response would be to, I don't know, shut down and say, okay, I need to make sure that my child is okay, and therefore I'm not going to, speak out in public, and I'm going to stay silent. I'm going to get on with my own thing. Maybe I'll leave. Like, I think, what is it you think that makes you keep doing the things that you're doing in that impossible reality?
Yeah, I think many people are, even here in Israel, Palestinians in Israel don't understand what I'm doing for mainly two reasons. One is, how can you do that? It's very easy to lose hope and to just fuck them all, like, fuck you. If you don't see what's happening in Gaza and you're like still, or like even if you're going out on the streets and you're only able to talk about the hostages, like, can't you see? Like, and it's very easy to give up. Like, why do I even bother to talk to Israelis? Why do I even bother to do that? So that's like one one option. Very easy, to opt in. Very logical, understandable to opt into that. It also can be out of fear, of course, just that I don't want to do politics at all. We saw mass, waves of persecution, arrests, people beginning fired, students being expelled. It's real. It's very, very real. And the second option is people who are ideologically don't believe that Palestinians and Jews should be, doing this. It's a very small fraction of the Palestinian society in Israel, but we will talk about this later, in later episodes. And I think both are very legitimate reactions, very understandable reactions, and probable reactions. For me, I feel like, should I not have been in a political home that gave me the political imagination to do things differently and to give me the power, the support, the stamina to do this. But ideologically, I don't see any other way. Also, when you're an organizer and an activist, you see the Israeli society. You see a society that is very racist, very militarized, very divided, very hateful, but also extremely hurt, scared, angry, and confused, and in crisis. And you see people who are really weak. You see, homeless people and just marginalized workers and women, and you cannot not see these things if you're part of the society and you're an organizer, and you cannot not assume responsibility over that as a leader. And once you do that, that's it. That's the radical thing, in my opinion. You said, a lot of the critique is about us not being radical enough. And I think the most radical thing I can do as a Palestinian is take responsibility over Israeli society as a Palestinian without depoliticizing myself. I think that's the most radical thing I can do. And that's what I do, almost every day as a council member in Haifa, a mixed city in Israel. I led a joint slate as a first Palestinian woman to do that. I fight for social justice, for economic justice, for climate justice, while holding, our truth, for our right, for freedom and justice and equality on this land as Palestinians.
I think something that a lot of people will be asking themselves or wanting to ask you is, number one, why do you call yourself a Palestinian citizen of Israel? Or what is important to you about that identity? And also, how does it feel for you to say Israel, to say that you live in Israel?
Tricky. Why it's important for me to say Palestinian?
Yeah, as opposed to Arab Israeli.
A lot of people actually say that to me, especially, when you're in electoral politics, it becomes a very real question, because you're you actually are losing votes for that. It's not that I choose to say I'm Palestinian. I am Palestinian. I didn't choose that. I am Palestinian. It's a fact. But I choose to highlight it. I choose to highlight it not out of confrontation, not out of provocation, but out of claiming space within Israeli society as a Palestinian, in an attempt to create and imagine this new political protagonist, a new collective. I think it's strategic for me to highlight it, and it's just factual for me to have it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
it's just fact.
Yeah. I think that's funny, and I do think Israelis think it's a choice, right? many Jewish Israelis do think it's a choice. They think I'm provoking them.
Well, not only that they think it's a choice, but that I think for a lot of people, like when I say that I work with Palestinians, that to people means I work with people in the West Bank or Gaza. Like there's a very clear divide linguistically of like Palestinian is someone that is not in the state of Israel, and Arab is someone who is. And so I think that concept has just entrenched itself into people's minds so much that when you then say Palestinian, it sounds like an attack. It sounds like are you telling me that you don't live in the same place as me? Like what is this?
Yeah. I mean, I think the conversation about the existence of Palestinians within Israeli society has been prohibited almost within the Israeli public discourse and politics and media. Like it doesn't exist. It's non-existent. And we need to normalize it. That's something that we do need to normalize. And I think that's part of the mission, the complexity of the mission that we're doing. And we will talk more about that, later about, protagonists and that what is our theory of change and how we do it. So we will talk more about that. But that's why I do it. And on a more personal level, this is urgent. My people are being annihilated. My people are we are experiencing a very immediate, very explicit, very expressed threat of not, staying on this land. And I think that my daughter, when she's an adult, she might not even be in a country that respects her citizenship or her passport, or and that scares me. That really, really scares me. I want to stay in my homeland and be equal and safe and free, and that's very real.
Just before we move on, I think something that is maybe unclear to a lot of listeners, both because of, education abroad and social media and the sort of Hasbara machine, I think it's unclear what it actually means to be a Palestinian citizen in Israel, and what is unequal about your life. What are the things that you feel? Like you said, you're worried that your daughter is going to grow up and not have her citizenship respected. I guess, what are the things that you can point to in your life that make it very clear to listeners that Palestinians, citizens of Israel, are not equal to Jewish citizens of Israel?
Okay. Very briefly, statistically, like policy-wise, economically, socially, we are, there is a systematic discrimination in terms of budget, education, housing, healthcare, art and culture. All of that obviously really worsened since the nation-state law that was passed in 2018 that basically deemed the state of Israel as the state of the Jewish people. And that means that everything that is not Jewish was actually deprioritized. You are talking about our pandemic of violence and organized crime of Arab families, mostly from Israeli citizens, but also from the West Bank, who have been collaborators with the Israeli police, the Israeli army, and have been basically given a pass into hoarding hundreds of thousands of guns and basically creating a system of organized crime, and which has been taking the lives of many Palestinians in Israel, in many ways even sometimes encouraged by the police, especially headed by Ben Gvir. We're talking about you can Google. I think people should Google those things, the statistics. But really, there are obviously extensive research on that. The Bedouin community in the south and unrecognized villages. Stealing land. Really settling the land is not only in the West Bank and Gaza previously, before the siege, but obviously they have very, very similar tactics within Israel, just seizing the land and taking it and building Jewish settlements on it. even within Israel. But really, it's about the small things. My husband works in a hospital. He can talk Arabic, and sometimes, if they allow him to speak Arabic with other fellow Arabs, even though they're like 50% of the staff, they are not allowed to speak Arabic. You're not allowed to speak politics in the hospital. You will be fired. You cannot say you're Palestinian. Like, that's not that politics is identifying as Palestinian. When you're on the train, today I just opened my feed and a photo from Gaza came on, and I literally panicked because there's so many people around me, and it was in Arabic, and I was like, I don't want to provoke, and it's near impossibility to live here. Good question. First question. Okay, Jess, are you ready for your question?
I'm ready.
Okay. So I was born into this. I didn't ask for this. I didn't think anyone would want to ask for this, especially if you have our views, of how this place should look like and how it shouldn't be what it looks like. But you did choose to come here. You weren't born in Israel. You're Australian born with some, and I will tell you.
Almost.
Yeah, almost. Oh, South Africa?
South Africa.
Oh, you were born in South Africa?
Yeah.
Okay. Raised in Australia?
Yeah.
Maybe I knew that. You chose to be here. Why are you here? Like, what's your role in all of this? Especially, if you claim who you claim you are.
If I claim who I claim I am.
Who are you and why are you here?
Who am I? Who am I and why am I here?
No,
it's a good question.
I think a lot of people would be wondering.
I'll say that the short answer is that no matter how hard I try or how much I would want to care about other things more than this place, I don't. And I just care so, so deeply about this place, about what's happening here in my name, the things that I, as a Jew, am responsible for. And I feel like I have a responsibility over the things that happen here. And that's why I'm still here, I guess. That's like the short answer. And the long answer, because that's what the podcast is called. The long answer is very long, but I'll try to keep it short.
No, please. Make it long.
All right. I'll
that's
make it
the
long.
point.
As you said, I was born in South Africa. My family moved to Australia when I was 3. And I very much grew up both as an immigrant and as a Jew. Like, I grew up as a person that was not from the place I was growing up. I had a different accent. I worked very hard to get rid of my accent because Australians are pretty racist and they don't like it if you sound differently to them. So I worked hard to get rid of my accent. I was embarrassed by saying words differently to other people, and my family kind of ate slightly different foods and acted a slightly different way and sounded different. So I really grew up with that feeling of otherness, and I also had this feeling of otherness because I really grew up as a Jew. I grew up in a Jewish community. I didn't have any non-Jewish friends until after high school. And then also kind of barely, there's very few meeting places. Also, even if, you go on and I went to a Jewish school my whole life and then went to university and kind of met non-Jewish people at university, but I had my Jewish friends and we hung out and we were in community together. And so I always kind of grew up with this feeling of general, not necessarily belonging to the place. And at the same time, there's a very purposeful, almost forced connection, I think, in a lot of Jewish communities around the world of pushing you to feel connected to Israel, or I guess the Jewish people, but through Israel.
Zionism. You grew up Zionist?
Yeah, I grew up in a very, very pretty standard Zionist Jewish community. I would say my Jewish community is probably more right-wing and maybe more in line with what some people might see as Zionist. Quite religious actually as well. I didn't grow up religious, but I grew up in like somewhat like modern Orthodox school. And I remember like all the time in school, we were asked this question of, are you a Jewish Australian or an Australian Jew? In terms of grammar, I've never understood it because like I think that it's actually opposite. Like Australian Jew means more Jewish and Jewish Australian means more Australian. Like one's the adjective, whatever. I'm not really sure what the two things mean. But I do know I grew up being asked that question and being asked to like constantly decide what is more important or what is more like
What defines you?
bullet.
Yeah. Bullet. Like highlighted, I
What is
guess?
more highlighted, I
Yeah.
guess.
It's more.
And I think I really internalized that in a way that some people don't. But I really internalized this thing of like, I'm a Jew and I'm just always a Jew and I'm very, very, very Jewish. I don't really know what that means actually. But then I sort of went to a youth movement when I was like a teenager. And that's kind of where I learned about the issues here. I learned a bit about the occupation. I learned about poverty, like Israeli politics and things like that. And it kind of instilled this desire for me to be part of, I think at the time I would have said like fixing Israel. Like
Because you always saw it as something that represents you.
right, like
And is in your name, the whole
yeah,
project. You know?
exactly.
The whole, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think I grew up kind of believing that everything was like perfect. We actually had when I was a leader in the youth movement after high school, like when I was an adult at university, we put on a conference and like we put on a limud in the city that I was
What is
from.
limud?
Limud is like a international Jewish conference that takes place in all sorts of places around the world. And I'm from Perth in Australia, and it's a very small community. And we put on the first limud in Perth, and it was a very small conference. And we had a panel at the conference, and the title of the panel was, "Is it okay to talk about the problems in Israel?" As in like in schools, in shuls, like in synagogues. Is it okay to talk about the problems? And that wasn't necessarily about the occupation. It was like, is it okay to talk about that the minimum wage is very low or that there are asylum seekers that don't have any status, right? That was what that meant, basically. And me and my friends always joke about how there was someone that stood up halfway through that conversation and said, but what is wrong with Israel? Like, what are the problems? Like, you're talking about, is it okay to talk about them? But
I don't
there are none.
understand.
Yeah, and that was it. That was like very clearly kind of what I grew up in. And then in this youth movement, I got really, really passionate about going and like saving the country. Because I think at the time I was still kind of in that very Zionist framework. But I felt like I was very much like a leftist and left wing. And I understood that there was an occupation. I understood that like Palestinians are not equal. I just don't think I knew the extent of it at all.
Let's circle back because you did say why you stayed, right?
Yeah.
And you're staying because it is done in your name and you are, complicit. You feel complicit and you're taking responsibility. So what changed from coming here to fix it to staying? What changed?
I think there were a number of like points at which I kind of understood like the glass shattered again and again and again. But I think that in general it was like, number one, like meeting Palestinians and actually having to see if my beliefs hold up in front of Palestinians, kind of like really understand through the lens of a Palestinian what life is here, what Israel means to them, what Zionism means to them. It was that, and it was also just like really seeing it for my eyes. It was like going on a tour of Hebron. It was like going to East Jerusalem. So there was all of that, which is kind of like a personal and experiential things that sort of led me to understand just how kind of, it's not just that there's small cracks in the society, it's like it is broken, and that is because of the foundations that Israel was built on, I think, and what Israel and Zionism means for Palestinians. But on another level, I was working with the asylum seeker community in Tel Aviv for a few years, and I...
Asylum seekers?
So I was working with a community of asylum seekers, which were mainly from Sudan and Eritrea. And asylum seekers in Israel basically have no status. They, instead of having an asylum interview and then being granted refugee status or not, There is no process. They just remain asylum seekers for the most part. I got very passionate about that, so I went and studied a master's degree in migration studies. And on an intellectual level, it was that master's degree that made me understand that there can be no policy for asylum if you don't grapple with the Palestinian question, I guess, for lack of a better word, because then you have to grapple with what it means that there are Palestinian refugees. And so Israel can never have proper asylum or refugee policy without tackling this. And that kind of opened this whole trail of like, well, you can't fix any of these things. And the biggest root of the problem is this thing. And so I think then I started getting much more involved in activism and activist spaces, and started eventually working for Standing Together. And I think for me, I mean, you mentioned the word complicit. I think I hate the word complicit. I think maybe because I don't like a lot of the people that use it. I think that when people use the word complicit, it feels like they're motivated by guilt. And I really feel like I'm not motivated by guilt at all. I'm motivated by responsibility. I think that guilt is like deeply unhelpful. And I wish that so many Jewish people around the world actually would not be motivated by guilt and this desire to
not in my name.
Right. It's like this
No,
desire
it is in
to
your
like,
name.
yeah,
Take
it's
responsibility.
in your name, and you can take responsibility or not, but like it's happening. And because then I think that comes into, you know, I feel complicated about being here because I think we don't always necessarily think in terms of pure logic and rationality, but I think I feel complicated being here because of my proximity to complicity, because it feels like here I am closer to suffering or closer to being complicit, or it's like more in my name because I pay taxes and because I sometimes go get matcha. And what does it mean to go downstairs and buy matcha when the state is starving people an hour away, right? Like that feels insane. But also I think that like being further away is just being further away from suffering. It's not actually being less responsible. And while I think that people shouldn't put all the blame on Jews, like I think that people shouldn't be discriminating against a random, you know, Jew in Vancouver about what's happening to Palestinians because they're a Jew. I don't think that should happen. But I do feel on a personal level like I am somehow connected to this thing and always will be. And this thing is happening in my name or by my people. I think people around the world could understand that October 7th happened to Jews around the world as well as it happened to Jewish Israelis. Like people very clearly, logically understood that everyone felt that. And so it's like, I think to the same regard, like I very logically feel that the things that Israel is doing now for the past almost 2 years and the things that the state of Israel has done for decades before have also been happening by me and my people. And I'm choosing to take responsibility for that.
I think many people would come and say, no, there is the Israeli collective, the Zionist collective, and then there is the Jewish collective around the world. And sorry about that. And you would do a service to, you know, the Palestinian cause to just leave, just disconnect yourself from the Israeli Zionist collective.
I think I get it. Like I understand why people say that.
I have an answer to that as well. If you don't,
I think I have an answer.
Yeah.
Do you want to say yours?
No, I want to hear yours.
I think I get it. Number one, I think also like I understand on an emotional level. On an emotional level, it's like just get out. Just what are you doing there? Just like go. I don't know. Go somewhere else. And I get that, and I feel that a lot of the time too. I think that, and
you know,
I dream about that sometimes. But
my uncle says, if you can't take the heat, if your skin cannot take the heat, the sun, just get out of here.
Well, I say you could just stay inside.
It's a joke.
Sunscreen.
No, but it is very emotional. Like
yeah.
I'm just, you know, my uncle is that emotional,
right.
Obviously, you know. Yeah.
It's an insane place to be. It is like, it is crazy.
No, it's very real.
Right. And you know, I was just visiting friends actually in Australia a couple of months ago. And I met up with people for coffee on my last day. And it was some day that like the starvation in Gaza had really intensified. It was like something, I don't know what, I don't remember what happened, but it was some switch. And I'd like stayed up really late reading the news, and we went to get coffee, and I just couldn't bring myself to order anything or eat anything. And I was in a really bad mood. But it was my last day with my friends. And I kind of tried to explain why I felt that way. And I felt like no one understood why I was like viscerally unable to eat. And it's almost like that's the difference. Like this, you just feel it, and it's like in your bones, and it's in your veins, and it's in everything you do. And if I'm not here, like I don't think the material like no one's material reality changes whether I'm here or not. I am not the main character in this situation. And I want to be here, and I want to be helping and doing what I can to try and change people's material reality. I think that not being here, I know that I probably won't have an impact on what things look like. And here I have a chance to do that. I have a movement behind me. I have people with me. I have friends and partners who are like in this struggle. And I guess that's my answer. But I also think that a lot of the people that say that also think that like most Israelis, like the best thing that they can do is leave.
I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you.
By the way, this is a conversation that I really struggled with, to be honest. I'm gonna be very honest. Like and by the way, it's not just about you, it's about every Jewish person here who's like, having to talk about their heritage and their also foreign passport, even though not many have it. But then it's like, oh, like just like, why are you here? Like you don't, and like, and especially when our existence and our nativity and our, as indigenous people, and like I'm indigenous, like I have more, like the feeling of righteousness. It is something that I deal with. Like I dealt with it much more in much more difficulty before. I still deal with it sometimes. I still have that anger. I still have that like self-righteousness even of like, but I also try to resist it.
Right.
Why? For two main reasons. One, I think, there are many reasons that are inhibiting us from an equal partnership, within the hegemony, the Jewish hegemony, and the, many, many things that are inhibiting us from doing that. But I think that comes from the other side of sometimes creating a space or a dynamic where the Palestinians are always right. Oh, you're right. Like, I'm not like challenged. I'm not, you're like smiling, like, yeah. Like, oh, you're right. Like, no, like challenge me. Like, that's okay. I'm not always right. And like, if I am, I don't feel like I'm in an equal partnership. And I don't want to feel that righteousness as a victim or as an indigenous, and I don't want that. And the second reason, which is complementary to that and completely not disconnected, is that there are 7 million Jews on this land. Right. A small portion was here, indigenous, who continue to be here, let's say it like that, continue to be here for the past hundreds of years. Obviously, most of them came as, part of the Zionist project and settling the land. And then obviously after that, the Israeli state who encourages people to come and that is very problematic, and it is something that we can talk about. But the matter of fact is that there are 7 million Jews on this land, and that's not going to change, Yeah. And the people who might think that they are, who might even entertain the idea of leaving because of this question of, do I have the right to be here, are so few. But also they are the only people that I want them to be my partners at this point to help me convince the majority that don't even think about this, right? Because this is their home.
The people that are making life for Palestinians worse every single day are not asking whether they should leave. Like they are the ones that are staying. And I think that's like a crucial also part of this story is that like they're not So, what? So, okay, so everyone that relates to the question relates to some sort of guilt of being here, then leaves. And then the only people we're left with are like the Ben-Gvirs and the Smotriches. And I think like that's also scary.
So my belonging is like almost forced, like almost survival.
Yeah.
How do you feel like you belong here?
I think it's
like
a really...
What makes you feel like you belong here?
It's a really tough question for me because I think my belonging here is... My belonging in Australia is like conditional on like identity. Like it's there is a part of my identity that feels like it doesn't really belong there. Whereas here, my identity belongs, like the identity that I was born with, I guess belongs here. But my belonging is conditional on whether I conform to the sort of narrative of the place. And so I think that's hard. I think in some ways I feel this like extra sense of belonging in the way that, you know, in Australia, I would just have to, like, you know, people would say Merry Christmas all the time. Yeah, Merry Christmas, whatever. And have to like go and do exams on Rosh Hashanah or whatever it is. And
welcome to our world, Jess.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. But that's
you know what I mean.
That's what we're talking about. That's what the whole podcast is about.
Yeah. It's a bit worse for us.
Yeah.
But
I think that gets at the thing that your belonging here is almost the opposite to my belonging in terms of identity, but also you are born into a sense of belonging because of this land and the place it is. Just the state kind of comes between that. But I think really I like feel this belonging in like those little things, right? When I order weed and I wish the dealer Chag Sameach, right? Like happy holidays in Hebrew. And it's these little things that I'm like, oh, I am like part of the like...
You're part of the people.
The people.
Yeah, these are your people.
Yeah.
I envy that. I feel that sometimes like when I go to like the West Bank, to Ramallah, or like when the signs are in Arabic, like just in Arabic, or like when everything is just, I feel like a glimpse of that, and it's like, it's a painful like glimpse. But I get it. And I would say, you know, people also will talk to me, or will, you know, we also talked about this, like, oh, should you be the co-host? Like, should be like, you know, someone who wasn't born in Israel, you know, an Ula, do this, Ula, like a Jewish immigrant, do this.
And, you know, it was something that was proposed to me to do. It was something that I was like very excited about doing with you. But at the same time, I was very unsure about like what it meant for me to be doing this as someone that's not from here. I've been here for 6.5 years, but like, as someone who was born here and your whole life is here and you don't have another place that you could call home, how do you feel about, you know, doing a podcast with me, a little outsider, I guess, in many ways?
A little outsider. I'm very excited to do this with you, for many reasons, of your talent and your emotional intelligence and your depth. And, you know, you're amazing. People don't actually know that you actually started and launched and built the page, the Instagram, you know, page and social media in English for Standing Together in the last 2 years. You're brilliant. That's first of all. So that's like, regardless of it, where, you know, where you grew up. But I think that you cannot argue with belonging, with affiliation. And I see you taking responsibility passionately and relentlessly over the Israeli society and not shying away from that. And you could choose not to do that. And I think that's amazing. And I just want to say, you know, regardless of how we do it, and really is everything that we're gonna be talking about during this season and like this podcast Obviously, we're going to open a lot of ideas and a lot of concepts. We did mention a lot of things that need to be, opened, and we're going to talk to more about them. A lot of things that we didn't mention that needs to be mentioned. But at the end of the day, the most important mission that's we're always relentless about is changing our reality. And I really think people need to understand that, going forward into this. So thank you for being here. The next episode, the second episode, is really gonna talk about 2 years since the 7th of October.
What it means for us to be marking 2 years of this absolute horror, and to do that together.
So tune in for the upcoming episodes that we're going to have. And thank you so much for listening.
And we'll see you soon. This show is produced by Yoshi Fields and music is from Epidemic Sound. Please like and subscribe wherever you listen. And if you have a question for us, feel free to email us and we might even bring it into the show. Our email is podcast@standing-together.org. We've also put it in the show notes. We'd really love to hear from you. And if you'd like to support the podcast, feel free to donate to Standing Together. You can find the link in our show notes too.